Are you struggling with patients being able to afford your care and they end up dropping out? Maybe they tell you they just want to use their insurance. They end up having really high deductibles, or maybe it's the way your financials are being presented. Whatever the reason patients are dropping out, it's frustrating. I'm Holly Jensen, and today me and Dr. Miles Bodzin are going to review two very important things you could be doing in your practice to help increase revenue and retention. Let's get started.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Holly. And with no further ado, we'll get right into today's topic. And I will share my screen in just a second. But before I do, let me just say a welcome to everybody. Happy New Year. We're in the month of January. I know we were just saying this morning, we can't believe we're halfway through the month of January in the new year already. And a lot to cover, a lot to go over. And I will share with you just a quick, a little background. Nothing frustrated me more in practice than putting all my love and attention into a patient and helping them, and then for them to self-dismiss and not follow through. And my frustration wasn't just from a personal financial perspective. It was from the frustration I knew that came from knowing they could have gotten better results and gotten better, results from their chiropractic care had they just followed through. And I know we've all had those struggles and those frustrations. So we decided to put on this topic today of increasing your revenue and retention. We're going to focus on two specific ways of doing that. There's actually numerous things to do, but today we're going to focus on two that we think have the greatest impact on your bottom line of having people follow through, get great chiropractic results, and ultimately affect your financial bottom line as well. So hence the title, Increase Your Revenue and Retention. A little background, Holly and I have been doing this now. We've been working together going on just over 2 decades now, over 20 years now we've been working together, sharing this story and this message of how do you increase your cash collections, how do you increase your patient retention, how do you reduce your stress, how do you have more joy in practice and helping your communities, and that's ultimately what's driving us today. Let me remind myself here. Okay, a couple disclaimers I got to put out there. Anytime we do a webinar, we'll be discussing some financial stuff in here. So just a few disclaimers real quick. Any examples we show or case studies we show of people getting great results, obviously that is based upon them doing the things they need to do, and it's no guarantee that you'll have the same results. Just a quick little disclaimer on that. Number two is we'll be showing examples of financials and fees and things of that nature. By no means is that a recommendation that you charge the same fees. We're also not suggesting necessarily that you end up leaving any particular insurance company. So just to get the legal stuff out of the way, just to clarify, this is for educational purposes. Little background, there's little Holly right there in the middle. That's me on the far right with the funny mustache. And this is probably back in like around the year 2002, 2003 or so in front of my chiropractic office. And just a little quick background, when I was in practice, I shared one of my big frustrations, like many chiropractors, was working on patients and having a care plan or desire of them a treatment plan and them self-dismissing, and the repeated process of people dropping out of care over time led to me getting very frustrated in practice. And some of you on this call right now, in this webinar right now, may be in that exact place right now where you're experiencing some challenges, or you just want to see a way to improve your PVA and your retention. And I made it a mission of mine in practice to figure this out. In fact, in that very clinic you're seeing there, I used to interview patients. I had a camera. This is back in the day, and you have to use a video camera, not cell phones. And I would interview them, asking them questions like, "Hey, John, you've been here for 6 months. Why are you still coming in?" Or, "Hey, Mary, you've been here for a year. I'm just curious, what's driving you to still be here?" And I really did a lot of research interviewing patients to figure out what drove their behavior to stay. And then later, when I had the opportunity to interview people who self-dismissed, I would ask them questions like, "Why did you leave?" Those types of things. And we learned a lot through that process, and we distilled it down to some key principles that we're going to share with you today of what drove their behavior to either stay or leave. Real quick, some of you may have seen this movie. I'll just throw it out there, a quick thing. We did a movie a number of years ago on this story that I'm going to share with you today, or on our background of what drove us, where we learned how to overcome these challenges. And if any of you are interested in seeing an inspiring movie about becoming a chiropractor and maybe overcoming some challenges, maybe take some time to watch this short movie we did, thecallingmovie.com. Just throw it out there for you, something that's a lot of fun to do. Maybe at a lunch break, it's about a 45-minute session. We find that most people who watch it, they tell us they really enjoy it and get inspired by it. So if you want to see a story about becoming a chiropractor, thecallingmovie.com, you can go visit. All right, so let's get into this today. What's one of the leading causes of patients not getting the full benefits of a care? And I think I've alluded to this already. It's simply they drop out prematurely. So you recommended they needed certain treatment plan and they self-dismiss, premature to them reach their goals. It's one of the leading causes of patients not getting the full benefits of care. In fact, when I'm in front of a live audience on stage, I'll often ask this question to the audience to get a show of hands. And the question being is, docs, if there was an adjustment or a therapy that I could teach you right now, and you would always get better clinical results, who wants to learn that? And every hand usually goes up like, yeah, show me how to do that adjustment if I'm going to get better results with it. And the bottom line is we do that, or we want to learn that simply because we want to help our patients. That's why we became chiropractors, is to help people. And if you agree that you would learn an adjustment to get better results, wouldn't you agree that one of the reasons patients don't always get the full benefits of their chiropractic care or the best results from their care is simply not because you didn't know that adjustment, it's simply because they failed to follow through. And if you understand that that's the reason they don't get the full benefits, then it makes sense to learn what are things you can do to keep people from dropping out. And that's why you're here today. And that's what we're going to share with you today. Some things you could be doing to prevent people from dropping out or reduce the likelihood of them dropping out of care. What's the number one challenge facing chiropractors? Again, we see this as poor retention. And, we're all attracted to the shiny objects. Show me how to get more new patients. What's the new marketing gimmick? What's the new thing I need to do to get more new ones, right? If you had all of your patients not dropping out, I guarantee you will be less concerned about getting new patients. Once you have a practice full of practice members, not that you don't want new patients, but you wouldn't be so concerned about it. And when doctors finally figure out and apply these principles and reduce their dropout and they increase their retention, they come back saying they're having so much more joy, less stress, less focus on marketing. They're just really enjoying themselves in practice. What does poor retention cost to your patients? I think it's pretty obvious. They're just not getting the full benefits of their care. They're not getting the benefit of what you can do for them is as a result of them not following through with care. And of course, what does it cost you, the doctor? Well, it costs you a number of things, not the least being the financial consequences of people dropping out early, the stress of always needing to replace people. I mean, for those of you who've been in practice for 5, 10 years right now or more, imagine if, majority of your patient files that are inactive sitting in your practice were still coming into you on a regular basis. You'd be plenty busy. You'd be making all the money you want to make, and you'd be happy, and all the things that go along with that process. Successful, high profit practice.
Dr. Bodzin, I want to just touch on that point real quick. Going back, like, what is it costing the doctor? But what is it costing, like, the way your practice runs? Is your staff frustrated? Or is there incongruencies and inconsistencies in the way that you are running the front desk or the back office? Do you constantly have staff churn, because they're unhappy? They're not having the same joy that you're having in practice, doctor. So, working together with you, Dr. Bodzin, for the last 20 years as your CA and now your chief operations officer, it's really important to have a joyful experience in the work that we do and the service that we provide. And so
I'm glad you brought that up, Holly. It's like, we just had our team meeting at Cash Practice this morning with our entire company. And the focus today was on the why we do what we do. Why we do what we do. And I shared with the team that as members of Cash Practice working with our clients, our doctors, there is no doubt that there are people's lives being changed as a result that my team members are helping, that have an impact. Our Cash Practice team members are helping practices, and those practices are helping people get better results. And I was trying to inspire them to know that when they get up in the morning and they're on the phone working with a doctor, that they're having an impact in the world, that there's babies that are not asthmatic, that there are kids that are healthier today, that there's families that are under less stress as a result of the work they're doing to help our doctors. And, that's that joy that comes from doing what we do ultimately is what drives us. And that's why we're doing what we're doing right now. We have tremendous passion for helping our doctors, because we know at the end of the day that the communities they serve are going to be healthier communities, less stressed communities, et cetera, all of that stuff. So with that being said, this is why we focus on it so much. So when it comes to a high profit chiropractic practice, the one thing they have in common is they have high retention. We see this, and we're in a very fortunate position where we get to see thousands of practices. We've been doing this a long time, and we've worked with a ton of practices. We have thousands of clients, and we get to see what are the common traits among these really successful $1-million practices. Almost all of them share this in common, and that is they have a high patient retention. They have high PVA. They don't have a low PVA. And these high retention practices have one thing in common. When we identify them and see All of these practices with high retention, they have one specific thing in common, and that is they have a lot of loyal patients. The practice members are loyal to them. They are sticking with them through thick and thin. That when that patient is at a chamber mixer or at a social event and happens to meet another chiropractor, they're not changing because of that. Maybe they met him and that's fine, but they're not leaving you. Or when COVID happens, they're not leaving you. They're not leaving with their insurance changes. Like, they're sticking with you through thick and thin. These practices have tons of these people in their practice. They're loyal to the practice. And what we've identified is a loyal patient requires 4 things. It's not, and this is something we learned going back to the days where we were doing all these interviews and really kind of studying the behavioral psychology or what's going on in people's minds that drives them. There's 4 key things. And I'll get to those in a moment, but what I want to share with you is that a loyal patient is 80% more likely to choose you over a competitor. That loyal patients are twice as likely to recommend you to others, and loyal patients are likely to spend twice as much in your practice. That loyal customer, that loyal patient is a significant benefit to your practice from a business perspective. And again, I want to always kind of emphasize, this isn't just about the money in the business. That's the benefit to you. The ultimate aim here is to help patients get better results from their care by helping them stick through things and follow through. What makes a patient loyal and not drop out? So I was mentioning there's 4 things. What makes a patient loyal and not drop out? Number 1 is, and you might want to start taking some notes here, because now we're going to get into like kind of the meat and potatoes of things. Loyal patients need, number 1, they need frequent contact. This is your patient education. This is your marketing. This is all of your communication. This is your reach out to them. And what we've learned is it's not so much the message that's important, although that is a key component. It's the frequency. How frequent are you in front of your people? Are you in front of them once a year, once a month, once a week, once a day? Like, how often are you in front of them? Frequent contact is extremely important when it comes to people being loyal to you. Number 2 is loyal patients need feedback. They need to know how they're doing. You must give people feedback, especially once they're feeling better. I'm going to guess every one of you on this webinar right now has had a patient come to you who's been to another chiropractor. And if you have, and you've been in the habit of asking them, why are you changing? Why are you coming to me now and not going back to your previous doctor? If you haven't asked that question, you should start asking it. But if you've asked that question, I bet you've heard things like, well, I just don't know how I was doing over there. Or they'll say things like, well, it just felt like it was time for something new. They just felt like they wanted me to keep coming back. They'll say some kind of negative sentiment like that. And where that comes from is that previous doctors' complete failure to effectively communicate feedback to that patient, that they knew where they stood, that they knew that there was objective benefits to what they were receiving. So feedback must be given to a patient, otherwise it will lead to them eventually dropping out. 3rd thing people need, they need a frictionless payment experience. It must be seamless and automated, especially in today's world. We started doing this stuff 20 years ago. We started doing frictionless payments, but it's even more important today now that everybody's used to everything happening automatic, with Venmo, and everything is, easy. It's through their phone, it's through their credit card, everything is automatic. There's no physical, you're at the grocery store and you see someone pull out their checkbook and they're about to pay in front of you, and you're like, oh my God, who writes a check these days, right? It's a very friction-full experience, right? Versus it being a very automated. Everything needs to be very seamless and easy in the practice. Easy into the practice and easy out of the practice. So frictionless payments is a key component to people being loyal to the practice. Number 4, loyal patients need forecasting of care. People need to know what your plan is. They must know. This is what you call care planning. If you don't have a forecasted care plan for a person, and I don't mean just their care, but you forecast their time requirements to see you, how often they're seeing you, etc., how long they're going to be seeing you. You forecast out their financial obligations. They know what they're getting into right from the beginning. The failure to do that is a major blockage to patient loyalty and patient retention. We refer to these 4 things as the retention principles, because ultimately what we find is these are the things that drive retention. There's 4 key components that you operate in the practice. You have frequent contact, you have feedback, frictionless payments, and forecasting care. And many times when we meet doctors, they're really good in some of these. Like, we'll meet the doctor who's really into the clinical side of things, they're really into marketing, and they're not so much into the business side of things. We all know that doctor, right? And they're really good with their patient education. They're really good with their frequent contact. And they're actually pretty dang good with their feedback because they're really into the clinical side of things. But when you analyze the way they forecast their care and their frictionless payments, it's awful and it's horrible. And that's the cause of their patient dropout. And then we'll meet other offices where they're good in one or two of the other areas, but they're not so good in the others. And ideally, you want to have strength in all four of these areas in the practice, that you identify where am I strong and where am I weak. And wherever you're weak, you want to improve those things. Today, we're going to focus on two of these. We refer to these as the 4 Fs. It's an easy way to remember them. In fact, when we're out lecturing and teaching, we find by using that language, people start picking it up and learning it very quickly. It's easy to remember. You need the 4 Fs: frequent contact, feedback, frictionless payments, and forecasting care. Those are the 4 things that you do from a business perspective in the practice, in addition to your clinical side of things, of course. So that we refer to those as the 4 Fs. Again, to review, the 4 Fs are feedback, forecasting care, frictionless payments, and frequent contact. Those 4 things, when you put attention on them, you will automatically see retention improving. Now, will it happen overnight? No, none of this stuff is overnight. All of this stuff that I'm going to teach you are things that you put in place, and you'll come back a year from now, you'll look back over the last year and say, wow, things have really changed in this past year. Will it change overnight? No. Will it change in a few weeks? No. It'll change over the course of many weeks, many patients, and many months of doing this. But what will happen is a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, your practice will look drastically different. It'll look drastically different. So to create patient loyalty, the way we actually execute this, the way we actually do this is we apply the 4 Fs throughout what we call the loyal patient journey. Loyal patient journey. So what is a patient journey? A patient journey is a process of a patient going through and seeing you, whether that process is, or that journey is, you know, they call you up, they come in for one adjustment and that's it, and then you never see them again, and that was their journey. Or they call you up, they come in, they get a consultation, an exam, a report of findings, they start care, and then they drop out. Or do they complete their corrective care plan? Or do they go into wellness? Like, how far do they get in the process? Are they with you years later? That journey, every patient's on one. The question is, does the journey you execute in your practice lead to them being loyal? Or does it lead to them dropping out when the pain is gone? Or does it lead to them dropping out when their insurance runs out? Or does it lead to them dropping out at the end of care when it's time to transition to wellness? You can design that journey, and we've done this, to be an effective process where it takes them and it predictably creates at the end, as long as you follow all the steps, well, I should say as long as you do. We're not dealing with machines, so it's not 100%, but as long as you follow, you have the greatest chance of that person becoming loyal to the practice and loyal to you, and you do this over and over and over with patients. This loyal patient journey we've mapped out for you to make it really easy. And when you stick to the end of the webinar today, as a little carrot for you guys, we're going to give you a link to download a copy of this for free. So you'll have a PDF of this loyal patient journey. But it's an 11-step process we've identified of taking a person from initial call to all the way on step 11, where they've transitioned to a lifetime wellness practice member and they've become loyal to the practice. You'll see on that journey these big danger symbols. And those dangers in the journey identify the common places we lose patients, where we commonly, predictably, they drop out. For example, their pain goes away, and they drop out. Or their insurance ran out, and they drop out. Or they were insurance, and now you're trying to convert it to cash. Or it's time to transition them to wellness. Like, there's these predictable points of time where people self-dismiss. And we've identified those. We've also identified ways to neutralize them. And we're going to focus on a couple of those ways today. I will also encourage you, there's a web page we'll direct you to, and I'll just give you the title of it right now. I don't know if the link is next or where we should give it to you at the end, loyalpatientjourney.com. You can go to it at a later time. And there's an interactive page where you can interact with this, and where you can actually click on the dangers, and it'll tell you what they are, and how you neutralize those dangers. So I want to change gears here for a second and kind of summarize where we're at this point in time, where we are at the webinar and what I've gone over with you. The ultimate aim of all of this stuff is to create success for you and your patients. That's the ultimate aim. Success for your patient is they've completed their treatment plan, they've gotten great results, they've transitioned onto wellness, they've become a loyal practice member. Success for you, the doctor, where your practice is full of these people. Your revenues are high, your cash collections are growing, you have less dependent on new patients, life is joyful, for lack of a better word. You define that success in your practice. Now, the way we accomplish that success, or the way we advocate you achieve that success, is by focusing on retention. Now, that's not the only way to get success. Let me clarify. There are other ways of having success in practice. Some of you may know doctors, or maybe yourself are one of these doctors, who have made it a point to market for PI patients. And you have a network of attorneys that refer PI people to you all the time, and that is your avenue of getting new people and doing cases and generating success in your practice. That is a valid way of running a practice. It's not what we're advocating. What we're advocating is focusing on retention for your patients so that you build a practice full of these loyal people. The way we do that is one patient at a time, taking through a journey that leads to that individual becoming loyal to the practice. Eventually, you'll have a tribe or an army of these people who are just loyal to you and your practice. The way we do that is applying these 4 principles that I just reviewed with you: feedback, forecasting care, frictionless payments, and frequent contact. We do those 4 things throughout the journey. That journey will lead to them having a retention practice, which ultimately give you and your patients the success. Today, we said the topic is 2 things you could be doing to increase revenue and retention. And those 2 things we're going to focus on today are what I just highlighted there: the forecasting care and frictionless payments. And you might say, why are we not focusing on the other 2? Well, because there's only so much time that we have to spend with you today. But more importantly, simply because those 2 have the greatest impact on your retention. That's why actually they're in the center of the pyramid. They're literally holding up the most weight of that pyramid. They have the greatest impact. They're not all equal, meaning you can do feedback and frequent contact and you'll have so much impact on your retention. But if you're not doing the forecasting and frictionless payments, it's going to be really challenging. In fact, many chiropractors are like this. They really focus on their patient education and they really focus on their feedback, as I kind of shared the example before, but they're not really good at their forecasting or frictionless payments, and their retention suffers. So we're going to focus on these 2 because they literally have the most impact. In fact, we know practices that do these 2 and not so good at the other 2. They're not doing so great at the feedback and the frequent contact, but in spite of that, they still have pretty darn good retention. But when you do all 4 of these, this is when you ultimately build a practice with extremely high PVA. To give an example, in my own personal practice, when I retired from practice, my average patient had been with me with a PVA of just over 300 visits. That's 24 times the national average of 12. 12 is the national average of PVA, and in our practice, we saw just over 300 visits on average, with many people with way more than that, but that was on average. And the way that happens is by applying all 4 of these principles throughout seeing a patient. So we want to show you how to do that. We're focusing on these 2, the forecasting of care and frictionless payments. When you do this, it results in tremendous growth over a long period of time. There's no doubt, if I wanted to teach every one of you how to have a great month of collections next month, I could teach every one of you how to do a kick-ass report of findings, how to close the deal, how to sign up people on prepays, all of that kind of stuff that's typically taught out there. And you will say, oh my gosh, I doubled my collections next month or last month, right? That's a definite thing that can happen. However, that doesn't grow a practice. We see over and over that these practices get to some point, they plateau, they go up and down, they struggle because their re-sign rate is terrible. The only practices that grow like I'm showing you on the screen here, here's a practice from 2008 who did 142,000 in cash collections their first year with us, 206 the next year, 271, and you see each year how they were growing. And then all of a sudden around 2016, 17, it really started taking off, whereas in 2021, they did 2.2 million in cash collections. And we have practice after practice that does this. Here's another practice that when they did their first year with us, they did 1.8 million. They were already kicking butt when they joined us. Okay, 2021, they did 4.3 million in cash collections. 2018, 1.5, and each of these cases, each of these different doctors, this is their growth. And the only practices we've observed that do this, that continuously grow month after month, and more importantly, year after year. Again, I was sharing with you, this is not an overnight success. This is you doing the things you need to do to add people to the practice, and as you add them, and more importantly, you don't lose them, this is the end result. And this money here, it's impressive, but it's not the purpose. It's a reflection of the fact that these are practices that have grown their loyal patient base. That's what they're reflections of. Consistent cash growth is the benefit to you, the doctor, as a result of you now having people following through with care, not dropping out, and you building that practice. From a patient perspective, not a patient, but from a people, actually not looking at dollars, but it grows a practice where you literally have hundreds and hundreds of people who have been with you for hundreds and hundreds of adjustments. What you see on the screen here is an actual picture from my practice years ago. Back in the day, we used Polaroids, and we would take their picture when they got to their 50th adjustment. And then when they got to their 100th adjustment, we moved their picture over to the 100 and 200, 300, etc., all the way down the wall where we had people with hundreds and hundreds of visits. And we had this hallway full of all these smiling faces of people who had been with us for many, many years with all these adjustments. Obviously, people don't get 200 adjustments in a few weeks, right? That's many years of care they've been under there. And it was a great way of rewarding people because we gave them some gifts and prizes. But it was also a great way of creating social proof that when new people came into the practice and they would walk down that hall going down for their adjustment, they would always stop and look at that wall of like, look at all these smiling, happy people. And lo and behold, more often than not, they would see familiar faces. Someone from their church or their community or their neighborhood. They would see someone and realize, wow, some other people I know are coming here, which is great social proof. So this is just a little tidbit I'll share with you. If you are doing something like this, I would encourage you to do something like this in the practice. Holly, did you want to add something? I see you in the camera back on.
Yes, I wanted to add we always get questions when we show this picture. Yes, we had patient signature to be able to show their picture. People loved getting their picture taken. It was like status on the wall, right? And then it also just put their first name and the date that they started care. So it really was a big impact in practice. And we had families being very competitive with each other of like, who's going to get to 100 visits first? So, exactly. It really, we were big on family practice. And so it was just really exciting for people to move their picture along the wall. So it was
like the competitive part of it was a lot of fun, where you literally saw husbands and wife competing, or brothers and sisters, or the kids competing. I mentioned the movie earlier, the callingmovie.com. You'll actually see there's a scene in the movie where we're actually giving someone we're taking their picture and giving them some movie passes as a celebration that they reached their 50th adjustment. Let me remind you, this is a perfect time of the year to remind you. Here we are in January. Everybody has New Year's resolutions. We know that people join the gym, and by February, nobody's going. Like, there is this sense that I'm going to do things, and a few weeks into it, they're already losing motivation. So when your patients commit to something and they get to their 40th or 50th adjustment, whatever it is, we make a big deal out of it because they committed to something, and here it is 6 months later, and they're still on board, right? They're still following through. So we want to reward that behavior. We want to reward the behavior we want, which was them showing up. That's what we wanted to do. So just a little side tip. That wasn't the purpose of today's webinar, but I thought you might enjoy that as something you can do. All right, so let's get back into this. Your patient visit average, which is a measurement basically of your retention, is significantly impacted by your forecasting and how frictionless you make your payments. So we're going to go through some examples of forecasting and models of frictionless or payment processing, I guess you would say, to improve things. Because if you improve these two things, I don't want to use the guarantee. I can't use that word, but I promise you, if you put focus on this, you should see an improvement in your retention. Okay, so let's go through this. I'm going to go through 4 examples of forecasting as well as payment friction. Number 1 is the default model, which is your forecasting is no forecasting at all, which basically means you're seeing people 1 visit at a time. There's no treatment plan recommendation. It's simply you see them, they come in, they're symptomatic, you care for them, and you say, oh, I'll see you on Friday. And then on Friday, you say, I'll see you on Monday. Like, they don't know what's been forecasted. You're just treating them visit by visit. And in that case, most people are paying per visit. Like, they're paying 1 visit at a time. In that model, we generally see the PVA get stuck around 12. No matter what else they do, these practices never get beyond about a 10 to 12 PVA. And that's the national average. These practices generally are run by doctors who are usually more symptom-based. They're usually more insurance-based. But that's generally what we see in that business model of a 1 visit at a time. Now, as I share each of these, I'm going to share some concepts you can do to improve them. In the per visit model, if you have patients who are 1 visit at a time, and we all do, no matter what you're doing, you're going to have those people who are they can't commit to anything, but they're going to come in to see you 1 visit at a time. Here's a suggestion for you. Instead of them coming in 1 visit at a time and paying you 1 visit at a time, you can do either of 2 things. One is have them sign an authorization form that basically says every time they come in, you don't have to have them stop at the desk and make a payment. You will automatically charge their credit card or their bank account for that visit. So there's an authorization form for that. They sign it, and now you can automatically charge them. That at least removes them having to stop at the desk and that friction-full experience of having to pull up their wallet and make a payment. The other thing that you can do in these people is try to move them to this next one, which is a exam to exam, or what you'll see in a moment here, a block of visits. So in this case, the forecasting is you tell a patient at a report of findings that you're going to get them started with care. You might see them 2 or 3 days a week, and you'll do a progress exam or a re-exam in a month. And then at that time, you'll let them know what the next step is. So the forecasting is simply from now into the next exam. It's not the full treatment plan. It's just from exam to exam. And many doctors do this where, hey, John, let's get you started. I'll reevaluate you next month and we'll take it from there. It's kind of a non-committal, or it's a very easy way of recommending things. You're not going to get much rejection from people or any of that kind of stuff. And so it's easy to do. A lot of doctors fall into this trap. What happens is in these practices, most doctors then sell their care in what we call a block of visits. People buy 6, 10, 12 visits at a time, and they use that, they purchase those in order to get to the next progress exam. So the doctor provides care, they maybe do 10, 12 visits, they get to the progress exam, and the patient's feeling better, and the doctor now has to do an exam and let them know if they need more care, and likelihood is they still do. And the doctors usually share with me that they always feel like they have to resell them on care. Like they know it's time for them to buy again, so there's this kind of feeling of, I got to resell them. Generally in these practices, we see the PVAs get stuck right around 24 to 36 visits. No matter what else they do, they get stuck there. They hit this glass ceiling. And the reason we believe is because most patients self-dismiss after 2 or 3 progress exams. Why? Well, they're feeling better. They don't necessarily see the benefits of going on beyond that, or they don't listen, or whatever it may be. But really the main reason is because they're feeling better and they have to make a decision about buying more care. And because there's a decision about buying more care, if they're feeling better, many of them just choose, well, doc, I'll let you know, and that type of thing, and they just kind of self-dismiss themselves. So these practices get stuck right around 24 to 36 visits with this business model. A way to improve this business model, and let me back up for a second. I mentioned with the pay-per-visit, those people at a nice improvement would be to get them to go to a block of visits. And I'll tell you again why. A block of visits is really good for the patient who is not a new patient, not a regular patient. A block of visits is really good for that person who they are going to come in infrequently, that they're not going to follow a treatment plan. Maybe it's an airline pilot who just can't. Their just schedule won't allow them to do it, but they want to come see you. They're a good candidate for a block of visits. It's not a good one to do on all patients, but it's a good tool or a good package for those specific cases. A way to improve that block of visits is, instead of it being where they buy a block and then every time they have to buy a new one, you set them up to auto renew that block. So when they sign up on it, it's like every 10 visits they're signing up to say, I'm going to automatically buy the next 10 visits. So you're removing that question. The next is the care plan. The care plan is going to be you're recommending 6 months of care, all of their services. It's a full comprehensive program. That's what we mean by a care plan. In this case, you could also collect that money as a prepay, which many doctors learn to do, where it's, they're closing the deal or signing people up on a prepay. It's an okay option. I don't recommend it as a primary thing you do, but it is an option out there. These practices usually get stuck at a pretty decent PVA, not bad, at a 50 to 75. Every office practically that I consult with that does prepays says the same thing. That is, they get people to sign up, they finish care, but almost all of them drop out at the end of the care plan. Very few continue on with care beyond that. So their re-sign rate is not great. The next is a care plan with monthly auto debits. This is by far what we find the greatest PVA. These practices are generally about 150 plus. They have the highest PVA we see with the business model, where you're recommending a program of care, 6 months, 8 months, a year, whatever it may be, and that payment is split into monthly payments and automatically being made. These practices, and when I showed you those case studies of all those graphs of the collections, but they're made up of a little bit of all of this, but the majority of it is care plans with monthly auto debits. That's the majority of what's going on in their practice. These are the practices that we see growing month after month and year after year. So when it comes to doing this stuff, we're saying you're going to do forecasting of care and frictionless payments throughout the journey of seeing a patient It's one thing to say it, it's another thing to execute it. In order to execute it, we like to use systems, right? You either have systems by intent or default. Your systems are always created, always a result of what you've created or tolerated. Meaning, are you do you have a system in your office for handling monthly payments? Do you have a system in your office for doing care planning? Do you have a system in your office to handle all of this stuff? Because if you don't have a system, then it just doesn't get executed. It just doesn't happen. It might happen here and there, but that just doesn't become routine. So by systematizing, and I think you guys all know this already, it's not a new idea to systematize things. You want to have systems to actually execute all the systems. And great systems, and I love this one, great systems are a set of procedures based upon a clearly defined set of principles that determines how you do something. So we spent the first part of this webinar defining 4 principles, the 4 F's. And great systems would be systems designed around those principles. For example, if we know one of the principles is to make your payments frictionless, then you want to have systems in place that execute that principle, that make your payment processing frictionless. So that means you're not having people stop at the desk. You're not mailing them statements expecting them to write you a check and pay a bill. You're not using third-party financing like a care credit that sends them a bill in the mail that they have to then physically pay. You're doing things in a way that everything's kind of happening automatic and seamless in every way possible. Even your one-time payments, I mentioned earlier, you have them sign a form authorizing you to automatically charge their card for that one-time payment each time they come in, even though they're not on a recurring payment. So you systematize everything around those 4 principles. So again, let's review. We had those 4 principles of feedback, forecasting care, frictionless payments, and frequent contact. We now have systems to execute those 4 things. The systems being is, one of them is a wellness score. The wellness score is a tool, I'll just quickly mention, that is a good tool, it's a great tool for giving your patients feedback in a way that totally makes sense to your patient. We have the care plan calculator, which is a tool, a system for forecasting care. We have the auto debit system, which is a payment process, if I get the words out, a payment processing system for frictionless payments. It handles everything, and we'll go over that in a moment here. Then we have our education system, which is an email marketing platform, is a system for frequent contact. Holly, did you want to add?
Yeah, so we just had a question, one of a doctor's asking, do you think just automating payments, which is what you described like in your illustration of increasing PVA, just automating payments, is that going to increase the PVA, or is that going to help increase patient retention?
So if all you do is automate payments, that's all you do, meaning you still have people paying one visit at a time, it's going to increase it to some extent. Yes, it will. Will it increase it fully? No. We like to say if you had a gauge, you're going to get so much improvement from each of these. If I was to measure that gauge, I would say of your retention, a good 40 to 50% of that retention is going to be under your forecasting care. That's going to have literally the biggest impact. Next, after that, automating payments will likely have, and I'm just kind of coming up with these numbers in my head right now to kind of in relation to each other, it's probably another 25 to 30% of it. And then the remaining portion is going to be the combination of the wellness of feedback and frequent contact. And the reason I say this is because we have example after example of offices that are just doing, they're literally just doing, they're really focused on forecasting care and frictionless payments, and they're not really putting any extra effort, I guess, into, well, let me back up. Frequent contact, every chiropractor for the most part is already doing some form of frequent contact. I mean, we're the gold standard when it comes to patient education. The question is, are you also sending out emails and text messages and, social media? Are you doing all these other things, which takes extra effort, right? It takes extra effort to do those things. So to answer that question, yes, there will be improvement in retention with just automating payments. Also, another thing you'll see is when you automate payments, we see in the average chiropractic office, we see around 35 to 40 hours of payroll freed up. What I mean is there's about 40 hours we've determined in the typical chiropractic office being spent by team members, staff members, collecting money. And by automating things, you're going to free up that time. So just do the math in your head. How much money are you spending per hour on your payroll? Let's just say 20 bucks an hour at 40. Do the math. $800 or so per month you're spending on payroll, probably with your taxes and everything else. Call it $1,000, whatever it is, your insurance and everything. That's what you're spending on a team member to collect money across the counter. When you automate it, that alone is going to free it up. So
yeah, I want to add in onto that is because the way that automating payments increases patient retention is because patients, when they show up, they don't have a new purchase decision to make every time, because they're not opening their purse, they're not opening their wallet, they're not stopping at the front desk. So really, like, not only is that going to increase patient retention, but it's going to increase your revenue. And the reason for that is because, and I'm speaking from experience here, as the CA, sometimes we forget to collect money, or it's a really awkward financial conversation, so we avoid it. So
Not only that.
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I thought you were done there. Sorry.
No, so if you could imagine, you have the patient's billing information on file, and I'm like, hey, John, today is going to be $60. I'll charge your card on file and email the receipt to you. Even if that patient is like, oh, I left my wallet in the car, or, oh, I just popped in today. And, so you can still collect that money instead of chasing it down. You're collecting it as it happens when the service is rendered. And that, from that standpoint, as a CA, that makes me feel good, because I hate awkward financial conversations. So, we work with a lot of offices, and we'll have some CAs who just have a poverty complex, and they just, they get physically ill just having to ask people for money. So you're constantly having patient balances due. Having patient balances due is a great way to open an exit door to your practice and increase patient dropout. We're all about increasing patient retention. And so if you can create a frictionless payment experience in your office, it's absolutely going to increase patient retention.
100%. And not only that, how you mentioned it reduces that stress, it increases joy for your team members. Yeah. So when we consult with offices, a symptom of a poorly run office is you get high turnover, CAs coming and going, high turnover. And many times that's just due to the fact there's no systems in place. It's an awkward process. So you want to systematize it, and then you end up having team members who stick with you for 10, 15, 20 years, which is a drastic improvement to the way a business operates. In fact, we see commonly among successful millionaires and billionaires, one of the common traits they have is they have team members who have been with them for decades. They have people who have been, their whole sole purpose in their career is to support the leader of that company. And in your own practices, you being the leaders, if you're going through staff turnover, you got to look inward and say, is there something you're doing wrong? Is our systems wrong? Something is wrong if you're not actually creating that loyal team members. So we're going to focus on these two things, forecasting care and frictionless payments, because at the end of the day, if you apply these things starting tomorrow, you're going to start seeing things turn around for you in practice and improve. Now, when it comes to forecasting care, really what it comes down to is having a care plan that you're going to present to a patient. That means you've come up with your treatment plan. You know what that is. Now, as a doctor, I'm not here as a fellow chiropractor telling you what your care plan should be. I'm not here telling you should be doing 6 months or 8 months. That's your job. You went to chiropractic school. You know what it takes for your patients to get well. And I mean really well. Like, if you're just kind of doing, I'll do 3-month plans because that's what I was taught to do, but deep in your heart, people really need 6 months of care. Well, then you got to look inward and say, why am I only doing 3 months? Is it because I'm doing it because it's easier, or what? You got to just really look at that. Bottom line is, at the end of the day, you need to then come up with, what is my comprehensive program of care I would need to get that patient from here to full results, where they're ready to transition to wellness care. That's what we mean by forecasting care, whether it's 4 months of care, or 6 months of care, a year of care, whatever it is, that's for you to decide and come up with it. Now, we can kind of guide you in some of that by talking with you, but at the end of the day, you're the clinician, you're the one that's coming up with that. Simply what the care plan calculator does is it gives you a tool to then present that to a patient in a compliant legal manner, taking care of all the financial aspects of it. And when I say compliant legal, it's beyond the scope of the time we have today, although we've done this topic many times, which is on the compliance side of things. We could do a whole webinar on the legalities and the compliance. It's beyond the time we have here. Let me just let you know this. You can't just come up with your own care plan, with your own languaging, and expect it to automatically be compliant. There's very specific things that need to happen in there. There's very specific rules around if you're going to provide any discounts and building out your care plans. You can't just make things up willy-nilly. Anytime someone becomes a client of ours, we'll go through that process with you to make sure that you're doing things properly and compliantly, so that you're not going to get yourself in trouble with dual fee schedules and all the kind of stuff that can happen when you're doing this kind of thing. So with that being said, This is an example of what that document might look like. It's multiple pages where and it's designed in a very specific way so that when you're reviewing it with a patient, there's a agenda you're going through. So it's designed with a specific agenda in mind in a proper way of reviewing a financial plan with a patient. For example, page 1 has on there, the summary of the services, what the total fees are, etc. When it comes to a total, we then found that the best way to present this to a patient is to give the patient 3 payment options. Option 1 is a monthly payment, as I've shared with you. Option 2, which is my favorite, is a down payment, so a little bit larger down payment with smaller monthly payments. And then a third option is a one-time prepayment. And the patient would choose what worked best for them. A third, and the next page has on there, for example, the terms of the agreement. This is all the legal stuff, like what happens if their insurance changes, if they're on insurance? What happens if they get in a car accident? Now they're a PI case. What happens if they need to stop early and self-dismiss because they're moving away? Like, what do you do? All of that stuff that's required to be in there. We also have in there, and I don't have the screen of it here, but we also have in here now what's called the good faith disclaimer. Now, legally, starting a year ago, we had to do this good faith estimate for the No Surprises Act. If you're not familiar with that, you need to get familiar with that. There is a page that goes over that information as well. I just don't have a screenshot of it here. The final page is where they sign for it and they authorize their credit card on file and their auto debit, etc. All of that stuff is clearly outlined in the actual document. It's not a handwritten thing. It's not fill in the blanks with a pen and pencil. It's all a professional document, and we'll demonstrate that here in just a moment. The next thing I want to point out is so that's your forecasting. It creates the actual contract, the agreement for you to enroll that person in care. The next is frictionless payments. And when it comes to frictionless payments, as I mentioned earlier, you want to make it really easy for people. So you might have people sign an authorization like you see on the left there where they've authorized an auto debit, or they've authorized a one-time payment, or they electronically sign their agreements. That's what you see in that animated image on the right where the person's electronically signing for their agreement, and all those digital signatures are on there. I believe we'll have a moment at the end where we can demonstrate that for you. You want to make it where if there's a payment due, you can email them a link to make that payment online. Or if their payment declined, they have a payment that declined, it automatically sends them a notice for them to make up that payment for you automatically, so you don't have to ask the patient to make that payment. We have a lot of cool features that make the system really frictionless for you. Again, automated payments, that's pretty straightforward, where every morning you'll get in the habit of opening up your email, first thing, I know you will, and you'll see how much money you collected last night when you went to bed. And you'll see, oh, last night I collected $3,000 or $4,000. Every night you go to bed, there's money being processed for you, and you wake up to that email reminding you of that. Digital signatures, like I mentioned, capturing their signatures on file, as I just shared with you, storing their billing on file, storing their credit card on file. And with our system, you could store as many credit cards as you want, as many bank accounts as you want. You could share billing between family members. So if you have a card on file that's shared between a husband and wife or a family, you could do that. You could also do a thing called split payments, which I don't know if I have a slide for that. Signatures on file. This is simply, I mentioned for that one-time payment. Maybe they sign an authorization form that says they'll authorize anything up to $200 or $300 every time they come in automatically. And you'll see on the receipt on the left, it literally shows the signatures on file for that transaction. So you as the CA, if you're the CA listening to this right now, when you run that payment, it alerts you that you already have a signature on file. You don't have to remember it. You don't have to try to keep track of who you have these with. It handles it all for you. So it's a really cool feature for those people who are just doing maybe those one-time payments. Or even someone who's on a recurring payment, you still get a signature on file for maybe they do one-time payments for like massages in your office or vitamins they purchase or a pillow. You could still have a signature on file so that every time they get those one-time items, you don't have to have them stop at the desk and make a payment. So again, we've thought about everything from the standpoint of automating this. Okay, split payments. This is a really great feature I wanted to mention. This is where in your EHR, you have a family of 3 getting care, and you run one payment, and it covers the mom, the dad, and the kid. Normally, with an EHR, you would have to run 3 separate payments so that each of those transactions posts to your EHR individually. Maybe $60 for Dwayne, $60 for Angela, and Carlos is another $50, and that would be 3 separate charges so that it posted properly in your EHR. Well, with our split payments, you don't have to do that. You could run one-time payment, or one payment, I should say, in this case, $170, and the system will automatically split it appropriately to go into your EHR. This is a game changer when it keeps keeping your ledgers accurate in your EHR, assuming you're using one of our integrated EHRs. This also works with our recurring payments. So you want to set up an auto debit that is $300 a month, split $100 between each family member. You can set up that auto debit, and you'll see on the receipt there where you'll see the names there, it splits it between each of those family members, and it'll post it to the correct ledger. This, if you're doing family programs or any of that kind of stuff, this is a game changer. This is life-changing for your CAs from the standpoint of keeping your patient ledgers accurate. And again, that's assuming you're using one of the EHRs that are integrated with us. So I mentioned before the loyal patient journey, and I said you guys can get a free copy of that. You can go to this URL or scan that QR code, and you can go to a web page, and you'll see, like in the image on the left there, it's an actual interactive web page where you can click on the different numbers. It'll describe that step of the journey. You can click on the dangers. You can click on things and learn about that. There's videos you can watch about how you handle each of those steps. I also want to share with you, I know, Holly, I think we still have time to do so. We're going to switch to you to just quickly demonstrate a few of these things in the software. But before I do that, before I turn it over, I want to mention to each of you guys, some of you I know are asking, I know Holly messaged me privately that some people are asking about if they want to become a member. Are there any promos or anything like that? Okay, so we do have a promo for you guys. This is for quick action takers. This isn't something that you come back next week for. This is for those of you who want to take action. We gave you the loyal patient journey. Everybody can download that for free. There's no cost for any of that stuff. But if any of you decide you want to work with us or utilize our systems, you can save $200. There is an onboarding fee. We normally charge $400 for these two systems. You'll save $200 by using the promo code retention200. In that image there, I just highlighted on step 3 of the sign-up process, and Holly will show this to you. There's a place where you can enter that promo code, and it'll knock $200 off. That'll work. Holly, correct me if I'm wrong. That'll work for you if you're a new member. It'll work for you or if you're an existing member, like adding systems on, like maybe you don't have one of these systems or two of these systems and you want to add it on. Or maybe you're a past member, someone who used to be a member and they're coming back and you want to reactivate. It'll work. Am I right in all those, Holly?
Exactly right. Yeah.
All right. There you go.
Love with the time that we have left to take the reins back from you and just show everybody.
All right. So I'm going to stop my screen and I'm going to turn it back to you and I'll shut up. And what we're going to do right now is Holly's just going to take a brief moment and share her screen and show you.
So
I know I did the same thing.
Yeah. So when you become a member, a cash practice member, we help you building template plans. So these are plans that you most commonly recommend to your patients. They're not some cookie cutter plans. It's not a one size fits all. You can specifically see here that, I've built all these template plans, whether it's a wellness care plan, 6-month 40 visit care plan, relief care plan, family care, whatever it is, plans with insurance. You build these out. You sit down with your team members, you build these out. So let's say in this example, Dr. Bodzin said, Holly, this afternoon, Angela's coming in for her report of findings, and I'm going to recommend she goes on a 6-month 40 visit corrective care plan. I'm going to find my template and I'm going to use this template specifically for that patient. So I'm going to put in the patient name here. And here's my patient. Now you can see there's all sorts of services and products listed in here, but my patient's only going to see what's being recommended for them. There's discounts that can be applied, whether they're insured visits, uninsured visits, and the system is smart enough to know once you apply the discount rule, if that item is at full fee or discounted. So for example, you can't discount visits to meet the deductibles or the co-pays. So this is an all cash plan, and then I'll try to create one. And well, you know what? Let me just throw an insurance in here. Let's say that this patient has 10 visits covered by their insurance at $35 a visit. So there's 30 visits not covered by insurance. So we want to incorporate their insurance right from the beginning so that we don't have to have a new financial conversation with them once their insurance benefits are exhausted. To help satisfy the good faith estimate requirements from the Patient No Surprises Act, we're listing out the CPT codes, our actual fees. I'm going to go ahead and calculate this plan here. And you can see here it's listing out. Now, we also incorporate Chiro Health USA or DMPO, Discount Medical Plan Organization discounts. I'll go ahead and turn that off in this section because that's just more time than we have today. But we do integrate compliant discounts with your own in-house prompt pay discounts. So we have a preview here. There's a lot of different knobs and dials, so I can further customize this plan to meet the individual patient needs. But once I'm happy with how this plan looks, I'm going to go ahead and print this care plan off on a professional document. You see it has the patient's name on it, what the time frame is, what the services are, the different payment options. So we have monthly, down and monthly, or prepay, just as Dr. Bodzin illustrated for you earlier. And this is the complete agreement between you and the patient on how the program of care works. The good faith estimate disclaimer, the plan enrollment information. But once the patient says yes to care, and by the way, we also have a full Academy library full of information, like videos on like how do you deliver a financial report of findings? How do you present care plans to patients? How do you master your day 1 and day 2? So we include that with our membership. So let's say we're at the point where the patient said yes to care. I'm going to enroll the patient into this auto debit. And this patient chose payment option 2 in this example. Let's say whichever payment option you want. We're selecting it here. We can add in their billing information, whether it's a credit card or bank account. I know I got a question earlier, like, can we ask them to do a bank account? Yes, you absolutely can. In fact, your processing fees are lower if you debit from their bank account. We can also determine a different card to use for their future recurring payments. And then earlier, Dr. Bodzin talked about frequent contact. So we have an email system that will allow you to automate patient education. So I would assign that from this step as well. For now, I'm going to go ahead and click the Enroll Patient button. And so this is doing several things at once. This is going to create my payment agreement and my service contract with the patient. And I actually have a digital signature device, this little guy right here, where I'm going to ask the patient for their digital signatures. So I'm going to go ahead, click on this e-signature device, and then I'm going to ask my patient for their signature. See, there's their autograph there. And now I'm going to ask them for their initials. This is all using that digital signature device. And this makes it really easy because now I have a record in the patient's billing history on my report, my payment reports of all of this information. So I'm just applying those signatures to their payment schedule, their care plan, the terms of the agreement, the good faith estimate disclaimer, and all of their billing information and auto debit information. So there's no surprises. I can tell you from experience, patients love not having any surprises. This is a clear agreement that shows them what they're paying, when their payments are coming out, how much, what their financial responsibilities are, regardless if they have insurance or not. And I don't have to have a new conversation with them. I can just focus on patient care and retention. So like Dr. Bodzin explained to you earlier, I do want to invite you guys to go to the events.loyalpatientjourney.com. I put that in the chat of the Ring Central meeting. Click here to download the ebook, but I highly recommend that you go through this page with your team and experience the loyal patient journey. From the time the patient picks up the phone to call your office to book their new patient appointment, all the way through when they transition to care. We have these interactive videos, we have these interactive danger buttons, or all the times you could be creating an exit door to your practice that you don't even realize. And for those of you who are like, yes, I want the loyal patient journey, but you want a demo of Cash Practice, when you scroll down on that page, you can actually book a demo and get a demonstration a web demonstration of how the cash practice systems can work in your practice, how to create these compliant care plans and frictionless payments. And then for those of you who are ready right now to just sign up, this is something that you want to add to your practice and simplify the patient journey in your office and create a high retention practice and experience more joy, you're going to use the promo code retention200 to sign up and take $200 off of your onboarding fees today. So if I go to join now and I go ahead and go to care plans and auto debits, you guys, this is a no-brainer, $69 a month, and it includes all of your training, all of your support. You can see all of the items that are included. But when you go to, we're going to give you 500 active patients to go with your account with one provider. On step 3, if you go ahead and enter in retention 200, that will save you $200 off the onboarding fee. So that's a great deal. You could do that right now. So Dr. Bodzin, we do have a few questions and then we need to wrap up.
Sounds good. I'll turn my camera back on so I can help out.
Okay. So one of the questions that I got that came through was, are you allowed to ask people to leave their bank account on file instead of a credit card? And so my answer to that is yes, our system will allow you to collect directly from their bank account using the routing number and account number. I actually prefer that because there's no expiration on bank accounts and they're less likely to have fraud on them. And then it lowers your processing fee. So yes, you can do that. So most people nowadays, they just going to give you a credit or debit card, but I let the patient know on your next visit, we prefer to direct debit from your bank account using the routing number and account number. And then if they ask why, I let them know. It helps keep our fees lower so we can continue to provide quality care at affordable costs.
I agree. I'll make one comment, though. You mentioned about the expirations. I will just add on, and even with that being said, we find most members, the majority of your patients are going to be on credit cards. So just to clarify, one of the services that we provide at Cash Practice, it's an add-on service, but it is a service that we recommend you use, and that's our auto card updater, which is a service provided by Visa and MasterCard where they will automatically update patients' credit cards for you without you having to ask the patient. When a person gets a new credit card in the mail or they report it lost or stolen, they get a new card, they have a new number, et cetera, or a new expiration date, our system will automatically update those for you with that auto card updater service. So that's an optional service you could turn on. Most of our members utilize that.
Yeah.
It reduces decline significantly in your practice.
The next question that came through, Dr. Bodzin, is, doctors asking well, what if the patient doesn't show up? Are we still collecting the money? Is this like a gym membership?
So the answer, okay, so let's talk about that. If someone's not showing up, first of all, there's some training in regards to them not showing up from the communication side of things. But, if once in a while someone misses a visit, that's not the end of the world because they're just going to make it up the next week. It comes down to how do you handle missed visits? Is it you missed a visit and they're making it up the same week? Are they making it the next week? Are they just missing it? But the bottom line is, in this case, they have 40 visits to use within 6 months. It doesn't say they have to use it within a certain frequency. It's not saying anywhere here 3 days a week for so many weeks and twice a week for so many weeks. It's simply they have 40 visits within 6 months to use. And the way it's written is that it's meant for them to use it in that period of time. Now, if they don't and it goes longer, there's clauses in the terms that handle that. Like you're going to extend the program for the time they missed. Or if they didn't fully utilize the program, maybe it gets prorated and they're refunded the difference. That's for an initial program like this, where there's a defined number of visits over a defined period of time, 40 visits in 6 months as an example. Whereas a wellness program is different. A wellness program is you set it up for 1 month where you're going to say, the patient's coming in once a week. So they get let's just say 4 visits a month. And it's a 1 month plan that auto renews every month. So every month they're supposed to get 4 visits. Obviously, there's going to be some months where they get an extra visit, or there might be some months where they get fewer visits. And what we recommend you do in that case is about every 6 months, you audit their account and look at, are they ahead or behind? Are they ahead or behind? And if, let's say, they're a few visits, they have, let's say, 4 extra visits because they missed a few visits in the last 6 months. You would then go to your patient and say, hey, Mary, we noticed you missed a few visits over the last 6 months. You actually have an extra 4 visits on the books right now. Would you like us to skip a month's payment, or would you like us to leave those 4 visits on the books in case you need extras in the future? What would you prefer? And the patient says, yeah, just leave them on there. Or they say skip a payment. Whatever they say, you document that, and that's what you do. So in the case of a wellness patient, you would have a practice in your a system in your office where every 4 to 6 months you want to audit those patient records to see, are you ahead or behind. The other scenario is someone's on an auto debit and they're just ghosting you. They signed up for 6 months of care, and 2 months into it they're just not coming in anymore, and a couple months goes by. At that point, you're not communicating, you're not getting anything, you just stop their payment, and you can't keep money for services you didn't render. So in that case, you might do a refund for what they didn't utilize. You'll prorate the account for the services they use and just terminate the program at that point. Hopefully that's not a common thing in the practice, but when it does happen, you have a process for handling that.
Yeah, and I'll just point out again, we provide information for you to be successful when implementing cash practice systems. So we have this whole academy section where we actually have like mastering your day 1 and 2, the scripting or the agenda to follow. And what I usually say when I'm presenting financial plans to patients is, John, it's my job as a chiropractic assistant to help make sure you're reaching the goals of care that Dr. Bodzin outlined for you in the report of findings. Dr. Bodzin wants you to be coming in for 40 visits over the next 6 months. So as you understand, you're going to be coming in 3 times a week. And I'll let them know my job is to help you make up missed visits. I'm not authorized to change your treatment plan. So we provide information like that to go above and beyond to help you and your team be successful when implementing cash practice systems. Because in order for you to have a higher retention practice and for your patients to get better clinical results, they need to follow through with care. And so we're not just giving you the tools that you need to create care plans. We're giving you the scripting, videos, access to all of this information so that you could be successful and your patients can have success in practice.
I mean, can you imagine your patient calling up and your CA saying, I'm not authorized to change your treatment plan? Like, have you ever heard that before, right? So the CA is clearly saying, I'm not authorized to change your treatment plan. Let me check with Dr. Bodzin if you can miss that visit or not, right? So there's languaging. Everybody's on the same page. So as Holly just so nicely indicated, when you do become a client, you have a lot of, I hate to call it coaching material because we're not a coaching company, but for a lack of a better word, there's some coaching material on there to help you in the languaging of how you handle this stuff in a practice. And in that day 1, day 2 material I'll just share with you, it's a process of how you take a person from phone call through the day 1, day 2, where at the end of that process, they are saying yes to a treatment plan in a way, this is what I'm most proud about, in a way that doesn't feel slimy to you as the doctor. It doesn't feel like a sales pitch. You're not using sales tactics to close the deal. You are using a structured process of communication that naturally leads your patient down a path where it's easy for them to say, yes, doctor, I'm ready to hire you for the next 6 months or the next year, whatever it may be. And this journey that Holly's kind of showing you here illustrates that process we go through in doing that so successfully.
So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. We appreciate the time that all of you have taken out of your day today to join us. If you have any questions or comments, feel free, reach out to us. Learn more at cashpractice.com. Learn more at cashpractice.com. But I encourage you, if you haven't done so yet, download the Loyal Patient Journey, book a demo, and see how we can help you increase patient retention and revenue.